You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. Wolfe refused an invitation the way most men refuse a second helping, with regret, firmness, and the air of a man being imposed upon by the universe. The invitation came in the form of Brett Sloane, lawyer, age indeterminate, but expensive, who arrived at our door at 11:30 on a grey Tuesday and acted as if he owned the entry hall the moment Fritz opened it. Sloane had a coat that looked tailored by a man who hated wrinkles, a hat that had never known rain, and a smile that had never met a client it didn't intend to bill. I was in the office with Wolfe, going over the morning mail, which mostly meant reading out requests Wolfe would reject and invoices Wolfe would approve, when Fritz's steps sounded in the hall and Sloane's voice arrived a half-beat ahead of him. "Mr. Wolfe," Sloane said, entering without waiting for permission, "thank you for seeing me." Wolfe did not rise. He did not extend a hand. He sat behind his desk like a broad, dignified obstruction and regarded Sloane with the same expression he uses for a limp lettuce leaf. "I did not say I would see you," Wolfe replied. "I said I would tolerate your presence for a moment. That moment is passing." Sloane's smile did not even blink. He had the kind of professional face that could absorb insult and convert it into a fee. He glanced at me, perhaps hoping Archie Goodwin would be the soft spot in the upholstery. I gave him my friendly look, the one that suggests I might be helpful right up until I'm not. "Sit down," I said. "Or stand up. Wolfe doesn't care which as long as you talk fast." Sloane sat carefully. He placed his hat on his knee like it was evidence. "I represent the Hargrove estate," he began. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "The Hargrove estate is not a person. If you are seeking my counsel, state the individual." "Lillian Hargrove," Sloane said. "The widow." Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction. The name meant something to him, which meant something to me. In New York there are widows and widows. Mrs. Lillian Hargrove was the second sort, the one who had been photographed at benefits and quoted at openings and rumored about in the same breath as Jules. Sloane continued smoothly. "Mrs. Hargrove requires an estate consultation." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I am not an attorney." "No," Sloane agreed, as if Wolfe had complimented him. "But you have discretion and an ability to anticipate complications." "I anticipate one now," Wolfe said. "You will leave." Sloane's eyebrows lifted barely. "Mr. Wolfe, this is a matter of family concern. Mrs. Hargrove has received threats." That got my attention, Wolfe's too, but he pretended it didn't. "Threats," Wolfe repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it stale. "Then she should speak to the police." Sloane's smile held. "She prefers not to." "Then she should adjust her preferences," Wolfe said. He glanced at the clock, the way a man glances at a waiter who is lingering. "I do not accept consultations. I accept problems. This is not yet a problem." "It will be," Sloane said softly. That was the first thing he said that wasn't polished. There was something underneath it. Pressure, maybe, or certainty borrowed from someone who had paid him to deliver it. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Is that a prediction, Mr. Sloane, or a threat conveyed by proxy?" Sloane's smile thinned for the first time. "It is prudence. Mrs. Hargrove is prepared to pay generously for your time." Wolfe's nostrils flared. He disliked being bought, and he disliked being presumed buyable even more. "No," Wolfe said. Sloane sat very still. "Mr. Wolfe." "No," Wolfe repeated, louder and flatter. "I will not go to her house. I will not receive her here under the pretense of legal consultation. I will not be employed to soothe the nerves of wealthy people who have grown bored with their own safety." "Good day." Sloane's jaw tightened. He recovered. "Then I must ask you at least to consider." Wolfe raised a hand. Sloane stopped, as if the hand had been a gavel. "You have my answer," Wolfe said. "Goodwin." That meant I was to escort him out. or at least to make it uncomfortable enough that he did it himself. I stood, smiled, and gestured toward the hall. "This way," I said. "Watch your step. Wolfe has a terrible habit of leaving refusals lying around." Sloane rose. At the door, he turned back to Wolfe with a smile that had regained its shine. "If you change your mind," he said, "you'll find Mrs. Hargrove does not." Wolfe did not respond. Fritz appeared as if summoned by silence and opened the front door with the calm dignity of a man who has seen more dramatic exits. Sloane went out. The wind took his coattails like an insult. I shut the door and returned to the office. Wolfe was already picking up the next letter on his desk, as if Sloane had been a fly he had brushed away. "Well," I said, "that was friendly." Wolfe grunted. "It was vulgar." "Threats to a wealthy widow," I said. "A lawyer who thinks you're a fire extinguisher, and you said no." "I did," Wolfe replied. "I will say no again if he returns." "Maybe he'll send a fruit basket," I suggested. Wolfe gave me a look that suggested he would prefer the fruit basket to contain explosives, so it could at least be interesting. At 1 o'clock, Fritz served lunch, roast duck, properly crisped, with potatoes that behaved themselves, and Wolfe ate with the same steady concentration he brings to orchids and to being right. The afternoon settled into its usual rhythm. Wolfe reading, me sorting correspondence, Fritz gliding in and out with civilized noises and smells. At 4, Wolfe went upstairs to the plant rooms because orchids do not tolerate delays, and Wolfe has arranged his life so that only orchids and meals can command him. At 5:15 the phone rang. He answered because that's my job and because Wolfe was above, communing with his flowers. Nero Wolfe's office. A man's voice said, "Is this Archie Goodwin?" "Yes," I said. "If you're selling something, I'm buying boredom." "This is Dr. Lionel Ruskin," the voice said. "Medical examiner's office." That made me sit up. Medical examiners don't usually call private detectives unless a body has gotten interesting. "Doctor," I said, "what can we do for you?" "There's been a death," he said. "Mrs. Lillian Hargrove." I felt the air in the room change. It was still the same room, same desk, same leather smell. But suddenly, it was tilted. "She died," I said. "Yes," Dr. Ruskin replied. "Fall in her bathroom, head injury, looks like an accident." "But," he hesitated. "I was told Mr. Wolfe had contact with her attorney today." "Brett Sloane," I said. "Yes," Ruskin said. "The report is being signed quickly, very quickly." "How quickly is very quickly?" I asked. There was a pause. "The coroner's office is satisfied. They're moving at record speed." That phrase, record speed, hit me like a bad smell. Nobody in city government moves at record speed unless someone is pushing from behind, and usually with money. "Doctor," I said carefully, "why are you telling me this?" Another pause. Longer. Then, because I don't like it, and because the last time someone wanted a wealthy woman's death called an accident fast. I saw Mr. Wolfe's name in the margin of a report later. I blinked. That was either a compliment or a confession. "Where is Mrs. Hargrove now?" "On her way to the morgue," Ruskin said. "But the scene is still secured. Riverside Drive, the Hargrove duplex." I looked at the clock, 5:18. Wolfe had refused Sloane at 11:30. Hargrove was dead by late afternoon, and the official machinery was already greased and turning. "Thank you," I said. "I'll tell Mr. Wolfe." I hung up and sat there for a second, staring at the phone like it had just accused me. Then I went upstairs. The plant rooms were humid and bright, a different world perched on top of ours. Wolfe stood among the benches, big hands gentle as he adjusted a pot. Theodore Horseman hovered nearby, frowning over a blossom like it had offended him. Wolfe turned when I entered. He saw my face and did not ask if lunch had disagreed with me. "What?" he demanded. Wolfe did not. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Dead," he repeated. "Bathroom fall," I said, "accident, and the coroner is calling it that at record speed." Wolfe's expression hardened. He set the pot down with a care that suggested he did not want to smash it merely because a human had been careless. "Brett Sloane," Wolfe said. "Yes," I replied. "Sloane was here at 11:30. He wanted an estate consultation. You refused. Now his client is dead, and the city is in a hurry to call it an accident." Wolfe's nostrils flared. He hated being involved. He also hated being challenged. And this, if it was what it looked like, was a challenge delivered in the ugliest wrapping. He turned away from the orchids, which was not a small decision. "Theodore," he said, "you will remain. Do not alter the schedule." "Yes, sir," Theodore replied, stiff. Wolfe looked at me. "Goodwin, get your coat. Going to Riverside Drive?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes were cold. I refused to be employed. I did not refuse to be provoked. I followed him downstairs, and as Fritz helped Wolfe into his overcoat, Wolfe added, voice flat, "If someone has arranged a death to punish my refusal, then I will take the case." "For a fee?" I asked. Wolfe's gaze cut to me. "For free." That was Wolfe's version of a duel. When Nero Wolfe works for free, it isn't charity, it's war chapter 2. If you want to see money behaving itself, you look at a well-run house. It lines up the silver, hushes the carpets, smooths the curtains, and makes even the dust seem educated. Mrs. Lillian Hargrove's duplex on Riverside Drive did all that and more. It also had a staircase that looked as if it had been rehearsing. Wolfe dislikes travel the way cats dislike baths. So when he does it without complaint, I watch closely for the reason. He sat in the back of the car with his coat collar up, eyes fixed on nothing visible, and the silence around him had that dense, controlled quality that means his mind is already in the house ahead of us. We reached the Hargrove building, where the Hargroves kept their duplex at 6:30. The doorman was the kind who has learned to look respectful without looking curious, but he failed anyway when he saw Wolfe's bulk and recognized it. Fame is a vulgar thing. Even Wolfe's gets fingerprints on it. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "They're upstairs. Police already." "Of course," I said. "The city moves at record speed when it smells expensive." A uniform on the stoop looked at us, then at Wolfe, and made the kind of decision cops make when they're not sure if they should salute or arrest. He settled for stepping aside. Inside, the lobby was warm and quiet, decorated for the season with pine garlands that smelled like somebody's attempt at innocence. We took the elevator, because Wolfe is not a martyr, and went up to the Hargrove floor. In the hallway outside the duplex, 2 uniformed cops stood with their hats pushed back, looking like they'd been told not to touch anything, and were trying to obey with their whole bodies. One of them knew me. "Goodwin," he said. "What are you doing here?" "Breathing," I replied. "Same as you, just with better grammar." "Is Kramer inside?" The cop jerked his thumb. "Yeah." Wolfe, who had been ignoring him, said, "Then I am delighted." That was Wolfe's way of saying he was not delighted at all. We went in. Inspector Kramer was in the foyer, with his coat unbuttoned, and his face already set for an argument. He saw Wolfe and his eyebrows jumped like startled animals. "Wolfe," he barked. "What the hell?" Wolfe didn't bother with a greeting. "Inspector, I am here because someone has used my refusal as a lever. I dislike levers." Kramer snorted. "You're here because you can't stand a headline without your name in it." "Your imagination is infantile," Wolfe said. "Where is the body?" Kramer's face reddened. "It's being handled. Coroner's men will take her out in 10 minutes. This is a police matter." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you allowing the coroner to sign it as an accident already?" That hit Kramer's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes slid away for half a second, which told me he knew exactly what Wolfe meant, and didn't like that Wolfe had said it out loud in someone else's hallway. Kramer recovered with a growl. "You want to interfere? Go home." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "I want to observe. Your interference is optional." Kramer stared at him, then made the decision he always makes when Wolfe is involved. Tolerate it long enough to see if it helps, while complaining loudly enough to preserve his dignity. "Fine," he snapped, "but touch nothing." Wolfe moved past him as if Kramer were a chair. The townhouse interior was a museum of tasteful wealth. Rugs that probably had their own insurance policies. Walls hung with art that looked as if it had been purchased by a committee. A Christmas tree in the front room, decorated in white and gold, expensive enough to be somber. The staircase rose from the foyer in a slow curve, glossy wood, polished so carefully it reflected the chandelier like a guilty conscience. At the bottom, a thick runner carpet was laid over the first few steps, then stopped. Above it, bare wood gleamed. I said softly, "Well, that's considerate." They padded the landing. Wolfe didn't answer. He stood at the base of the stairs, looking up, and his eyes did that thing they do when he's measuring a scene, not as a scene but as a mechanism. The coroner's assistant came out of a side room carrying a bag and gave Wolfe a quick glance that suggested annoyance at civilians. Wolfe ignored him. A woman in a black dress stood near the parlor door, hands clasped tight. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red, but not the weepy red of grief, more like the irritated red of someone who had been instructed to cry and had done it too long. Kramer jerked his chin at her. "That's the maid, Tessa Lane." Wolfe turned to her as if he had been introduced to a witness, not a servant. "Miss Lane," he said, "you will answer questions." She blinked at his tone. "Who are you?" "Nero Wolfe." That name moved through the room like a draft. She stiffened a little. "The detective." "The same," Wolfe replied. "Tell me what happened." Kramer started to protest. Wolfe ignored him with the ease of long practice. Miss Lane swallowed. "Mrs. Hargrove came home at 3. She was upset." "Upset is vague," Wolfe said. "Use a better word." The maid's mouth tightened. Angry, she'd been to see someone. She wouldn't say who. She went upstairs, then came down again, pacing. "Who else was here?" Wolfe asked. "Mr. Sloane," she said. I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe's face didn't change, but I could feel his satisfaction like heat. The lawyer had been here. That made the timing less coincidence and more choreography. Kramer said, "Rough." "Sloane was here to settle estate paperwork. That's what he claims." Wolfe didn't look at him. "Continue, Miss Lane." She took a breath. "They argued in the library." "Just voices?" Wolfe asked. "Yes," raised. Mrs. Hargrove said. She hesitated. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Words matter." She licked her lips, she said. "You people think you can close a book by tearing out the pages." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "And what did Mr. Sloane say?" he said. "I'm trying to protect you." And she laughed. "Not kindly," she said. "Protect me from whom? From the truth?" I felt my scalp tighten. That sounded like a woman cornered by something that wore legal shoes. Miss Lane continued. "Then she told him to leave. He didn't want to. She said she would call Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe's eyes lifted slightly. "She mentioned me." "Yes," the maid said, and her gaze flicked to Wolfe as if she were now afraid she had said too much. "She said your name," Mr. Sloane said. "You wouldn't come. She said you would if he made it personal." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I see." Kramer made a sound. "That's just talk. People say names." Wolfe finally looked at him. "Inspector, do not be stupid in my presence. It strains my civility." Kramer glared, but held his tongue, which was a small miracle. Wolfe turned back to the maid. "What happened next?" Miss Lane's hands twisted. I heard a sharp sound, like something dropped, then silence. "Silence," Wolfe repeated. "Sudden." "Yes," she said. "Too sudden. Mrs. Hargrove was loud when she was angry. Then, nothing." Wolfe's eyes went to the staircase again. "And then I went to the kitchen," the maid said. "I didn't want to. Listen." After a minute I heard a thud, not a crash, a heavy bump. I ran out and saw her at the bottom of the stairs. Wolfe asked, "Where was Mr. Sloane?" Miss Lane swallowed, standing halfway up, like he had come out of the library and was on his way upstairs. He looked down at her and said, "Oh my God." "What did you do?" Wolfe asked. "I screamed," she said, a little defensively. "I ran to her. She was still. Her head. She stopped." Wolfe's voice stayed neutral. "Did you touch her?" "Yes," she admitted. "I tried to wake her. Then Mr. Sloane told me not to move her and called the police." Kramer said, He did the right thing. Wolfe ignored him. Did Mr. Sloane call anyone else? The maid hesitated. He stepped into the library and used the phone. I heard him say, "It happened." To whom? Wolfe asked. I don't know, she said quickly. He closed the door. Wolfe nodded once. Then he moved toward the stairs. Kramer barked, "Wolfe, don't touch." Wolfe stopped at the first step and turned his head slightly. "Inspector, if you bark again, I will have Archie purchase you a leash." That shut Kramer up, at least long enough for Wolfe to do what he wanted. He examined the stairs as if they were a document. He didn't step onto them. He studied them from the side, bending slightly, eyes tracing the runner's edge. The polished wood above it, the point where the runner ended. I said quietly, "That shine is impressive." Wolfe grunted. "It is recent." "How can you tell?" I asked. "The odor," Wolfe said, and sniffed like a man judging wine. "A wax compound, freshly applied, and observe the runner." He pointed, not touching, at the runner's top edge. The carpet had a slight ripple, barely visible, like fabric that had been shifted and not perfectly smoothed. "Someone adjusted it," I said. "Someone and prepared it," Wolfe corrected. "A fall downstairs is common. A fall downstairs from a precise point is arranged," Kramer scoffed. "People wax stairs, people trip." Wolfe's eyes slid to him. "Do you wax the top 12 steps and leave the bottom 4 covered? It is an invitation." Kramer's face hardened. "You're making it up." Wolfe ignored him again and looked upward. "Miss Lane, where was the last place you saw Mrs. Hargrove alive?" The maid stared at the stairs. "In the hallway up there. She came out of the library and headed toward the stairs. Mr. Sloane followed." "Followed," Wolfe repeated. "Behind her?" "Yes." Wolfe nodded once. "Inspector, where did her body land?" Kramer jerked his head toward the foyer, where a chalk mark and a scuffed spot showed where she had been. "There." Wolfe's gaze went from the landing spot to the stairs and back. The runner would reduce the violence of a fall at the bottom, yet the head injury was fatal. Therefore she began falling above the runner. I said, "So the bottom was padded for show, but the real damage was arranged higher." Wolfe's eyes narrowed in agreement. Gravity was recruited, not trusted. The coroner's assistant returned, glancing at Kramer. "We're ready to move her," Kramer said. "Fine." Wolfe spoke sharply. "Number?" The assistant blinked. "Excuse me." Wolfe's eyes were icy. "You will wait 5 minutes." Kramer bristled. "You can't order." Wolfe cut him off. "Inspector, if you allow her to be removed before I observe the staircase thoroughly, you will regret it. I will see to that." Kramer's face went crimson. Then he exhaled through his nose like a bull forced to swallow. He waved a hand. 5 minutes. Wolfe moved up 1 step now, carefully, not placing his full weight, as if he didn't trust the stair to behave. Honestly, he inspected the banister, the wall, the edges where dust had been disturbed. He paused midway, eyes focused on a spot near the rail. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He leaned, sniffed again, and then said, "Oil. From the wax." "No," Wolfe said, "not wax. A different lubricant here, at hand height." I leaned closer and saw it. A faint smear on the banister, shiny in the chandelier light, as if someone's hand had dragged something along the wood. "A hand slip," I said, "or encouraged slippage," Wolfe replied. Kramer snapped. "You saying someone greased the rail?" Wolfe looked down at him. "I am saying someone increased the probability of a fall from a specific point. That is not an accident. It is a calculation." The maid made a small sound, frightened. "Mr. Sloane." He didn't. Wolfe's voice softened only slightly. "I have not accused anyone yet, Miss Lane. I have only accused the staircase." I moved my eyes up the stairwell and noticed something else. Near the top, where the stairs turned, a small side table held a vase of winter branches. The branches were bare and decorative, arranged to look natural, but the table itself was placed unusually close to the inner edge of the turn. Wolfe, I said. That table. Wolfe's gaze followed mine. His eyes narrowed. Yes, that's a hip check waiting to happen, I said. Or a balance correction, Wolfe replied. If one wished a person to reach for the rail at precisely the wrong moment, one might place an obstruction that requires a shift. Kramer swore softly. This is all theory. Wolfe stepped back down. Slowly, theory becomes practice when someone dies. Now, Inspector, who declared it an accident with such alacrity. Kramer glared at him. The coroner's office. Name? Wolfe demanded. Kramer's jaw clenched. Deputy Coroner Alden. He's signing. Wolfe nodded. Once, filing it away. Thank you. Kramer scowled. Don't thank me like I helped. You did, Wolfe said, inadvertently. The coroner's men moved the body then, and the room shifted into that official bustle that always feels indecent, as if death were being handled like laundry. While they worked, a door opened at the far end of the hall, and a man stepped out. Brett Sloane. He had removed his coat and looked as crisp as if he had been pressed for this moment. His eyes went to Wolfe, and for an instant something flickered there. Surprise, irritation, and a quick calculation of cost. Mr. Wolfe, Sloane said smoothly. I didn't expect you. Wolfe's gaze was cold. You should not expect what you have not earned. Sloane's smile didn't move. This is a tragedy. A tragedy, Wolfe repeated. Or an arrangement. Sloane's eyes hardened slightly. Be careful. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. I am always careful. It is you who came to my house at 11:30, and then came to this house before 3, and then called someone and said, it happened. Your carefulness seems hurried. Sloane's jaw tightened, but he kept the smile. Mrs. Hargrove fell. The medical examiner will confirm it. Wolfe nodded once. She fell. Yes. The question is whether she chose to. Sloane's eyes flashed. Are you accusing me of murder? Wolfe's tone turned almost bored. I am accusing you of employment. Someone employed gravity. Someone employed you, which is why I refused you, and why I am now here. I felt the hairs rise on my arms. Wolfe was doing what he does best, turning a conversation into a trap and inviting the other man to step into it with a smile. Sloane's gaze moved to Kramer, as if seeking comfort in official noise. Kramer stared back, enjoying Sloane's discomfort the way he enjoys any discomfort that isn't his own. Sloane said, carefully, Mr. Wolfe, the estate will proceed. There is nothing for you here. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. On the contrary, there is everything for me here, because someone has attempted to punish my refusal by creating a death with the appearance of an accident. That is insolence. Sloane's smile tightened. On what terms? Wolfe's answer was crisp. For free. Sloane blinked for the first time since he walked into our office. His mask slipped a fraction. A free wolf meant a personal wolf, and personal wolf is what people regret, Wolfe added. And you will remain available. If you vanish, I will find you. If you lie, I will expose you. If you interfere, I will destroy your convenience. Sloane's face regained its smoothness, but his eyes stayed sharp. You're making a mistake. Wolfe's lips curled faintly. No, Mr. Sloane. I am correcting one. We left the townhouse with the smell of polish and pine and money still in our coats. Outside, the river wind cut through the street, and the city's lights were already coming on, indifferent as ever. In the car, I said. Prepared stares. An argument. A lawyer who called someone and said, it happened. Wolfe stared out the window. Yes, and a coroner moving at record speed, I added. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, I waited, because when Wolfe is thinking, silence is often wiser than questions. But I'm Archie, so I asked anyway. What's the first move? Wolfe's voice was calm, and that calm told me the case had already become personal. We will learn, he said. Who desired Mrs. Hargrove dead today, rather than tomorrow, and who desired me to know it. Chapter 3, if there is one thing the city does with enthusiasm, it is misplacing responsibility. A woman tumbles down a staircase, the coroner yawns, the lawyer polishes his smile, and the police start congratulating gravity for being punctual. Wolfe, as usual, took it personally. Back at the brownstone, Fritz had dinner ready, as if death were merely an appointment that had wandered into the wrong day. Wolfe ate roast beef with the sober concentration of a man determined not to let murder interfere with digestion. I ate too because I've learned that when Wolfe takes a case for free, you take calories where you can get them. At 8, Wolfe sat in his office with a cup of coffee, and his brows in their most forbidding configuration. Theodore's footsteps sounded overhead, faint, as he adjusted orchid benches with the reverence of a priest tending an altar outside. The city continued its winter business, horns, wind, and people hurrying as if time were a creditor. The phone rang. Fritz answered in the hall and came in with the receiver, his face composed but attentive. "Inspector Kramer, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe took it as if accepting something sticky. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer's voice came through loud enough that I could hear it without leaning. He was in a mood, which meant he had either found something or been told he should have. "You been running your mouth?" Kramer demanded. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I have been speaking. Your vocabulary is not my concern." "I got the medical examiner on the line earlier," Kramer said, "and he says your name came up." Wolfe's tone stayed cool. "Then you should wonder why." "Don't get smart," Kramer began. Wolfe cut in. "If you have information, share it. If you have only noise, call someone who appreciates it." A pause. Then Kramer, grudging, "Raskin did a preliminary look at the body before they moved her. Not full autopsy yet, but he saw something." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "What?" "Bruise," Kramer said. "On her wrist. He says it doesn't look like she got it from falling." I sat up. "Which wrist?" "Left," Kramer said. "Pattern bruise, like fingers." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Accidents do not manufacture grip marks," Kramer grunted. That's what he said. Wolfe's eyes went to me for a fraction of a second. A quiet order. "I reached for my notebook," Kramer continued. "And there's another thing. This morning, she had an appointment with her attorney. Not Sloane, another one, to revise her will." Wolfe's eyes narrowed further. "Name, Harold Vance," Kramer said. "Old probate guy. He's at his office right now. Sweating, says she called at 10. Confirmed, then cancelled at 11:30. Wolfe's gaze went very still. 11:30. "Yeah," Kramer said. "That ring a bell." Wolfe's voice was flat. "Mr. Sloane was in my office at 11:30. Kramer made a dissatisfied sound, like a man realizing he's walking the same circle again. "So she cancels a will revision right when Sloane comes to see you, and she's dead by late afternoon. You think that's coincidence?" "No," Wolfe said. Kramer barked. "Then what do you think it is?" Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "A timetable, someone accelerated it." Kramer paused. "You coming down to the morgue tomorrow?" Wolfe's nostrils flared. "I do not come down. You will bring Dr. Raskin to my house at 10 tomorrow morning with his observations and his willingness to speak candidly. If you are intelligent, you will attend." Kramer exploded. "You can't order." Wolfe hung up. I stared at him. "You just hung up on homicide." Wolfe looked at me as if I had reported that water was wet. He was about to continue barking. I scribbled in my notebook anyway. "Grip, bruise. Left wrist will revision appointment. Vance cancelled at 11:30. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Hargrove intended to alter her will. Mr. Sloane attempted to employ me. She died hours later, and someone wished the world to accept the staircase." "You're assuming it's murder now," I said. Wolfe's eyes lifted. "I am concluding it." "Then why the hurry?" I asked. "If someone wanted her dead, why not wait a week or a month?" Wolfe's gaze drifted upward, as if the answer might be blooming among orchids. "Because the will was changing because a revision threatens a beneficiary, or because Mrs. Hargrove intended to disclose something that required silence before nightfall." I made a face. "New York is full of people who should be silenced before nightfall." "Few are," Wolfe said dryly. "Therefore the motive must be urgent." The doorbell rang. Fritz went to answer. I heard a voice in the hall, smooth, controlled, and irritated by the very concept of being kept waiting. Brett Sloan. Fritz's footsteps returned, and Sloan entered the office with the air of a man who had decided politeness was optional. His coat collar was up. His cheeks were pink from the wind, and his eyes were bright with a careful anger. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "this is outrageous." Wolfe did not invite him to sit. He did not tell him to leave. He simply looked at him as if Sloan were a stain that had appeared on Wolfe's desk blotter. "What?" Wolfe asked mildly. "Is outrageous. That you failed." Sloan's jaw tightened. "You're meddling. You were not retained. You refused to be retained." "I refused to be purchased," Wolfe corrected. "Now I am engaged." "Engaged by whom?" Sloan demanded. I leaned back in my chair because this was going to be entertaining in an unpleasant way. Sloan took a breath, then tried a different angle. "My client is dead. Her estate is in delicate condition. There are family members." "Name them," Wolfe said. "Her stepson, Martin Hargrove. Her niece, Celia Hargrove." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And her husband's family trustees." Sloan's smile tightened. "There is a trust." "Of course there is," I said. "Rich people don't die. They transition." Sloan shot me a look, then refocused on Wolfe. "Mrs. Hargrove's will is clear. It was executed 2 years ago. It will stand." Wolfe's voice stayed mild. "Unless she intended to change it this morning." Sloan went still. That was the first crack. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough to hide that he had been surprised. "I don't know what you mean," Sloan said. Wolfe's eyes were cold. "Then allow me to clarify. Mrs. Hargrove had an appointment with attorney Harold Vance to revise her will. She cancelled at 11:30. Sloan's mouth tightened. "I'm not aware of that." "You are now," Wolfe said, "and it troubles you." "It does not," Sloan snapped. And the snap was the second crack. Wolfe leaned back slightly, satisfied. "Mr. Sloan, you are attempting too hard to appear uninvolved. It is unbecoming." Sloan's face flushed. "You have no right." Wolfe cut him off. "Rights are legal. I am interested in facts, for example. You were at Mrs. Hargrove's house shortly before her death." Sloan's eyes flashed. "Yes, to discuss her estate." She was distraught. "About what?" Wolfe asked. Sloan's jaw worked. "About people prying, such as myself?" Wolfe inquired. "No," Sloan said quickly. Then, realizing the quickness, he added, "I mean, she didn't know you, not personally." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yet she mentioned me, according to her maid." Sloan's lips tightened. "She mentioned you because I mentioned you." "Why did you mention me?" Wolfe asked. "Because she needed discretion," Sloan said, voice rising. "She needed someone who wouldn't run to the newspapers or the police." Wolfe's tone stayed calm. "And you thought of me as a convenient instrument." Wolfe's eyes held him. "Competence is not flattery. It is a tool." Sloan exhaled. "Look, Mrs. Hargrove was frightened. She was receiving letters." "What kind of letters?" Wolfe asked. Sloan hesitated. "Threatening." "Threatening what?" Wolfe pressed. Sloan's gaze flicked to me, then away. "Exposure, ruin, embarrassment." Wolfe's voice sharpened. "Be specific." Sloan's smile tried to return and failed. "I can't. It involves privileged communications." Wolfe's nostrils flared. "Privilege is not a shield for murder," Sloan snapped. "It was an accident." Wolfe's eyes became very still. "You assert that with enthusiasm." Sloan's shoulders stiffened. "Because it was," she fell. "And you stood halfway up the stairs and said, 'Oh my God,'" Wolfe said. "Then you entered the library and called someone and said, 'It happened.'" Sloan's face drained. "Who told you that?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "A maid who heard you." Sloan recovered, but it was a poorer recovery now, like a dancer trying to regain balance on a slick floor. "I called my office," he said. "I told my associate to notify the family, that's all." "Name the associate," Wolfe said. Sloan's eyes hardened. Number Wolfe's voice was cool. Then you confirm your call was not routine. Sloane leaned forward, anger pushing through Polish. Mr. Wolfe, you are endangering the estate. There are beneficiaries who will not tolerate. Wolfe cut him off. There are beneficiaries who will not tolerate the truth. Sloane's eyes flashed. You don't know what the truth is. Wolfe's gaze shifted to my notebook on the desk. I know enough to begin. Sloane's voice sharpened. If you continue, you will find yourself opposed by people with resources. Wolfe's mouth curled faintly. So will you. Sloane straightened, breathing controlled. If you insist on this, you will need access. You will not get it from me. Wolfe nodded once, as if Sloane had offered him a menu item he already disliked. Then I will get it elsewhere. Sloane turned toward the door, then stopped, as if compelled by his own irritation to deliver one more line. Mrs. Hargrove intended to destroy something, he said abruptly. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Once Sloane realized what he had done, his mouth tightened. Nothing, he snapped. And then he was moving again toward the hall. I stood. Too late for nothing, I said. You don't drop a line like that and pick it back up. Sloane ignored me and left, his footsteps quick, controlled, and not quite steady. Fritz closed the door behind him with quiet finality. The office felt warmer, after Sloane's cold anger had left it. Wolfe stared at the closed door for a moment, then looked at me. Archie, he said softly, Mr. Sloane is frightened. Because his client died, I asked. Because she intended to destroy something, Wolfe replied, and he spoke of it involuntarily. I nodded slowly. And because the staircase wasn't the only prepared thing in that house. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Indeed, tomorrow. We will speak to Dr. Ruskin, then to Attorney Vance, then to the beneficiaries. We will learn what Mrs. Hargrove meant to change and what she meant to destroy. I picked up my notebook, and if she meant to destroy a will, Wolfe's mouth tightened. Number she could revise a will legally. Destruction implies evidence. He leaned back, massive and certain. Someone gripped her wrist. Someone recruited gravity, and someone required speed. That is the shape. The phone rang again, sharp in the quiet. I answered. Goodwin. A woman's voice, low and strained, said, Mr. Goodwin, I found something in Mrs. Hargrove's desk. Mr. Sloane told me to burn it. I felt my scalp tighten. Who is this? Tessa Lane, the maid whispered. He's coming back, please. The line went dead. I looked at Wolfe. The maid found something in Hargrove's desk. Sloane told her to burn it, and he's on his way back. Wolfe's eyes went very cold. Then, Archie, we must arrive before Mr. Sloane becomes an arsonist. Chapter 4. We reached Riverside Drive, with the kind of haste Wolfe detests, and I enjoy only in retrospect. Wolfe sat in the back seat like an outraged monument, and I drove with one eye on traffic and the other on the thought of Brett Sloane arriving at a desk drawer with matches. The doorman let us up without a question, which meant questions had already been asked and paid for. In the hall outside the Hargrove apartment, a uniform was posted, looking bored and slightly uneasy, as if boredom had been ordered and uneasiness came free. Goodwin, he said. You again. New York is small, I told him. Is Sloane inside? The cop jerked his chin. Just got here. He's arguing with the maid. I knocked once and went in without waiting for permission. It was Wolfe's method in his own house, and I'm his employee. The scene in the foyer was crisp. Brett Sloane in his fine coat, his face a controlled anger. Tessa Lane, the maid, pale and trembling, holding a small envelope, like it was radioactive, and Inspector Kramer, red-faced, between them like a referee who has learned he can't win. Sloane snapped. You had no right to touch her private papers. Tessa's voice shook. You told me to burn it. Kramer barked. Nobody burns anything in a homicide scene, Sloane. You want to roast marshmallows. Go home. Wolfe entered behind me, took one look, and his eyes did that quiet. Sharpening. That means he has found the most offensive element in the room. Mr. Sloane, Wolfe said, you are attempting to destroy evidence. Sloane's head whipped. Wolfe, this is none of your business. It is, Wolfe replied, because you brought it to my door, And then to this staircase, Miss Lane. Give me the envelope. Tessa looked at Kramer. Kramer grunted. Give it to him. He said it as if he resented the words, which meant he knew it was right. Tessa handed the envelope to Wolfe with both hands. Wolfe did not open it. Wolfe rarely opens things in public. He prefers to let other people perspire first. Sloane's voice went low, dangerous. Those are privileged communications. Wolfe's gaze stayed cold. Privilege does not apply to arson. Kramer snatched it from Wolfe's hand before Wolfe could enjoy himself too much. He tore it open, glanced at the contents, and then his eyebrows rose in spite of himself. What is it? I asked. Kramer held up a single sheet of stationery and a smaller folded page. A letter, he said. From Mrs. Hargrove to Harold Vance, the other attorney, dated this morning, and a codicil draft. Sloane said sharply. That's not executed. No, Kramer said. But it's interesting. His eyes moved over the page again, and his mouth tightened. She was cutting somebody out. Wolfe's voice was mild. Or adding someone in, read it. Kramer glared at Wolfe. Then read anyway, because Kramer can resist Wolfe only when it costs him nothing. He cleared his throat and read the key lines. Enough to sting, but not enough to be poetry. Mrs. Hargrove intended to revise the will immediately, reduce a trust distribution to Martin Hargrove, her stepson, and place certain assets under an independent trustee due to evidence of manipulation. The codicil included one more item. She directed that a sealed packet in her desk be delivered to Nero Wolfe, West 35th Street, if anything happened to her before the revision was executed. Kramer stared at the paper as if it had slapped him. She named you, he said to Wolfe. Wolfe's nostrils flared with offended satisfaction. I am not flattered. I am instructed. Sloane's face had gone pale at the edges. That's absurd. She was. She was emotional. Wolfe's eyes pinned him. She was precise, and you told the maid to burn it. Sloane snapped. Because it's useless. It's unfiled, unexecuted, yet inconvenient, Wolfe said, because it suggests motive. Kramer folded the pages carefully, like a man handling dynamite, and handed them to one of his uniforms with orders that sounded like he was trying to keep them from being eaten. Wolfe turned his attention away from Sloane, as if Sloane were already a concluded nuisance. He looked toward the staircase. Archie, he said, the runner. I was ahead of him. I went to the stairs, crouched, and lifted a corner of the runner at the edge where it had been smoothed too lovingly. Beneath it the wood gleamed, but not just with honest wax. There was a faint, tacky smear, transparent, slightly yellow, like the residue you find in office lobbies after someone has tried to make tile behave like ice. I touched it with a fingertip, then wiped it on a clean handkerchief. It came off too easily. Kramer barked. Don't, Wolfe said. Inspector, be quiet. That shut him up again. Wolfe looked at my handkerchief with interest. It's not household wax, I said. Wolfe nodded. It is too persistent, too uniform. Obtain a sample properly. I did, using a small blade from my pocket knife to scrape a thin shaving into a folded paper. It felt ridiculous, collecting a staircase's secret like a boy collecting bugs. But the difference is that bugs don't get paid to keep quiet. Kramer watched me and grunted. You think somebody polished it special? I think, I said, somebody made a staircase into a device. Wolfe turned to the maid. Miss Lane, who maintains the stairs. Tessa swallowed. The handyman Rowell. He comes when needed. Summon him, Wolfe said. Kramer snapped. We already talked to him. Wolfe's gaze cut to Kramer. Then you failed to listen. We waited in the foyer while Kramer paced, and Sloane simmered and Tessa Lane looked like she might faint if anyone spoke too loudly. Wolfe stood as if he owned the air. Raoul, the handyman, arrived 20 minutes later with a tool bag and a guilty face. He was a compact man in his 40s with hands that looked honest until you noticed how quickly they hid. Kramer said, Raoul, these people want to ask you again. Raoul's eyes darted to Wolfe. Again, Wolfe's voice was calm. You applied wax to these stairs. I waxed, Raoul admitted. Before the holiday party, Mrs. Hargrove liked it shiny. Shiny is not a chemical, Wolfe said. What did you use? Raoul shifted. Floor polish. What brand? Wolfe pressed. Raoul hesitated. I don't remember. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You do. You are choosing not to. Raoul's shoulders sagged. It was industrial from a supply place. It was stronger. Kramer's head snapped up. Industrial for a private house. Raoul licked his lips. Mr. Sloane told me, he said. Mrs. Hargrove wanted it perfect. He gave me cash. That landed like a brick in the foyer. Sloane said sharply. That's a lie. Raoul flinched, but he kept going, because once a man starts confessing, he sometimes discovers it's easier than sweating. He gave me a list, Raoul said. Polish, a solvent, and he stopped. Wolfe's voice went colder. And what? Raoul swallowed. A small bottle. Oil, he said to wipe the rail where hands go. Tessa gasped. Sloane's face tightened until his skin looked stretched. Kramer stepped forward. Sloane, you want to explain that? Sloane's voice stayed too smooth. This is nonsense. He's trying to save himself, Wolfe said. Mr. Sloane, your difficulty is that you try to look uninvolved by speaking too much. The handyman's difficulty is that he speaks too little until pressed. Both are instructive. I held up my sample. We'll have it tested. Kramer snorted. Test it where? You got a lab in that fat head. Wolfe's eyes flashed. I have resources. Inspector. Unlike your department, they function promptly. Kramer's face reddened. But he didn't argue. He couldn't. Not with Raoul's confession hanging in the air like a noose. Wolfe turned, suddenly, away from the stairs and toward Kramer. Inspector, the wax and the rail are the first crime. The second crime is the haste. Kramer frowned. Haste. The accident ruling, Wolfe said. The record speed. Someone did not merely arrange a fall. Someone arranged the city's acceptance of it. That requires influence. Influence has a source. Kramer muttered. You think Sloane greased the coroner too? Wolfe's gaze was flat. I think Mr. Sloane is a messenger. The question is, whose message was urgent enough to require wax, oil, and a rapid signature? Sloane's eyes flicked, just once, to the library door. Wolfe saw it. So did I. Wolfe said softly. Archie, the sealed packet in the desk, Miss Lane's packet, may not be paper. I started toward the library, and Sloane moved at the same time. One step, quick, instinctive. Kramer's hand shot out and grabbed Sloane's arm. Where do you think you're going? Sloane's smile reappeared, strained. I'm going to call my office. Wolfe's voice was mild as a knife. No, Mr. Sloane, you are going to stand very still while my assistant opens Mrs. Hargrove's desk. I reached the library door, and just as my hand touched the knob, the house phone on a side table rang, sharp, insistent, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment. Tessa Lane stared at it. That line, no one calls it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Answer it, Archie. I picked up. A man's voice, low and controlled, said, Mr. Goodwin, leave the desk closed. Then the line went dead. Chapter 5. The voice on the phone had been low, controlled, and so sure of itself it didn't bother with threats. It simply issued an instruction, like a man calling for his coat. Mr. Goodwin, leave the desk closed. Then the line went dead. I kept the receiver at my ear for a beat, listening to nothing, and I felt the same thing I always feel when a stranger uses my name in my own city. An itch between the shoulders. Wolfe's eyes were on me. Well, somebody who knows me, I said, hanging up. Just told me to keep Mrs. Hargrove's desk closed. Kramer tightened his grip on Sloane's arm. You got friends, counselor. Sloane jerked his arm free, cheeks pale. I don't know what that was. Wolfe's voice was calm. Of course, you do not. You merely serve them. Sloane snapped. That's enough. Wolfe ignored him and nodded toward the library. Archie. I opened the door. The library smelled of old paper, leather, and wealth. Money has an odor when it sits long enough. A fire was laid in the hearth but unlit, as if even flames required permission. The desk sat against the far wall, neat, expensive, and now, to my eyes, guilty. I approached it like it might bite. The top drawers were closed. The center drawer was closed. Nothing looked disturbed, which told me someone had been careful or had plenty of time. I glanced back. Wolfe stood in the doorway, hands behind his back, watching with his big, offended patience. Kramer and Sloane hovered in the foyer, the maid between them, Raoul the handyman clutching his tool bag like a shield. I opened the center drawer. It was tidy, too tidy. A woman like Lillian Hargrove didn't keep a desk the way a clerk keeps a desk, unless she was making a point. Inside were letterhead sheets, envelopes, a fountain pen, a small calendar book, and, tucked to the right, an empty space the shape of a file folder. No sealed packet, no will draft. No drama, either, which was the most dramatic part. Missing things are louder than present ones, I said. Wolfe, he stepped in, not touching anything, just looking. Empty, he observed. Empty where it matters, I agreed, I pointed. Something was here, a folder, probably the sealed packet she mentioned in the codicil. It's gone, Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And the caller instructed you to leave it closed, which is about as subtle as a billboard, I said. He didn't want us noticing it's already been cleaned out. Wolfe's gaze moved over the desk surface. Miss Lane. Tessa appeared at the library door, wringing her hands. Yes. Did Mrs. Hargrove use this desk today? Wolfe asked. Yes, she said quickly. After the argument, she came in here. She opened the drawer and took out papers. She was shaking. Did you see what? Wolfe asked. No, Tessa admitted. She told me to bring tea. Then Mr. Sloane followed her in and shut the door. Kramer barked from the foyer. Sloane. Sloane's voice cut back, sharp. I did not steal anything. Wolfe didn't look at him. He asked Tessa. After the fall, did anyone enter this room before the police? Tessa hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Sloane, then away. Mr. Sloane did, she whispered. He said he needed to phone someone. He was in here alone for maybe 2 minutes. Kramer's face darkened. 2 minutes is plenty. Wolfe's voice stayed level. Indeed, and the call you made, Mr. Sloane. It happened. Was it from this room? Sloane's voice came tight. Yes, and it was to my office. Wolfe's eyes were cold. Then you will not object if Inspector Kramer subpoenas your phone records. Sloane didn't answer. Silence is an answer when it has to swallow pride to exist. I examined the desk blotter. No scribbles, no torn paper, but the wastebasket beside the desk caught my eye, because it looked too innocent. People with tidy desks often have messy wastebaskets, and this one held only a couple of folded tissues and a magazine insert. It was a wastebasket that had been curated. I lifted the tissue. Under it, at the bottom, was a scrap of paper, no bigger than my thumb, singed on one edge, with a faint smear of black ink, part of a printed line, maybe, and the bottom corner of a signature block. I held it up carefully. Well, somebody tried to tidy too hard. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A scorched scrap from a printer, I said. See the dot pattern. Kramer shouted from the foyer. What's that? A souvenir, I called back, from somebody's attempt at erasing. Wolfe's gaze stayed on the scrap. If a draft was printed, then it existed. If it existed, it threatened someone. If it threatened someone, it was removed. And yet, Summonen burned it only partially. I said, amateurs hate complete work. Wolfe grunted, or they were interrupted. I slipped the scrap into my notebook pocket as gently as if it were a butterfly wing, and turned my attention to the desk again. There was a laptop on the side table, sleek, expensive, closed. I didn't touch it. I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe said, open it. I opened it with the careful patience of a man disarming a trap. The screen lit and asked for a password. Well, I said, Mrs. Hargrove believed in privacy. Kramer's voice came from the foyer, impatient. You got a dead woman's computer, and you're worried about privacy. Wolfe's eyes flicked at him. Yes, it is what separates us from animals. I looked around, found a small notepad on the desk and flipped it. Most pages were blank. One had a neat list in Mrs. Hargrove's hand. Vance, 10:30, bank, urgent, Sloane, do not trust, Wolfe, if needed. Under that, a single word, underlined twice, freeze. I showed it to Wolfe. He nodded once, satisfied. She anticipated danger, or she anticipated losing control, I said. Same thing to a woman like that. Wolfe's eyes rested on the underlined word. Bank, I said. We should talk to her bank. Kramer's voice was a growl. You don't talk to a bank, not without a warrant. Inspector, you will obtain one. Kramer bristled. On what grounds? Wolfe's tone stayed calm. On the grounds that the dead woman attempted to freeze something 2 days ago, and that she intended to revise her will this morning, and that a lawyer attempted to burn her documents, and that her wrist shows a grip bruise. If you require more grounds, you should resign. Kramer's face went crimson, but he didn't argue. He could argue with Wolfe about manners. He couldn't argue with him about facts when the facts lined up like soldiers. Wolfe turned back to me. Archie, we will proceed by ordinary means while the police proceed by official means. Call Mr. Cohen. I blinked. Lon, for a bank. For information, Wolfe said. He will know which bank holds the Hargrove accounts. If he does not, he will know who knows. Kramer muttered something that sounded like damn meddling, and started barking orders to his men. Sloane stood stiff as a statue, his expression tight, eyes darting toward the library like it still had secrets he wanted. Wolfe addressed him without looking. Mr. Sloane, you will accompany Inspector Kramer to the precinct for a statement. Sloane's head snapped. I'm not under arrest, Wolfe's voice was mild. Number, you are merely under suspicion. You should find that less comfortable. Kramer said with relish. Come on, counselor. You can explain your burning habits. Sloane's eyes flashed. He looked at Wolfe as if trying to find leverage, then looked at me as if hoping Archie Goodwin would soften it. I smiled back warmly. Careful on the stairs, I told him. When they were gone, Wolfe looked at Tessa Lane and Rowell. You will remain available, Miss Lane. Do not enter the library again. Mr. Rowell, do not touch the stairs. If you do, you will transform yourself from a witness to an accomplice. Rowell swallowed. Yes, sir, Tessa whispered. Mr. Wolfe, she really wanted to change it. She was terrified. Wolfe's eyes softened a fraction, not kindness, just attention. Of whom? Tessa hesitated. Of Martin. That name came out like a reluctant confession. The stepson, I said. Yes, Tessa whispered. He was angry lately. He said she was meddling with what didn't belong to her. Wolfe nodded once. We will speak to him. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took his chair behind the desk as if he had never left it. I called Lon Cohen, and Lon answered with the cheerful exhaustion of a man who lives inside deadlines. Archie, he said, don't tell me Wolfe took a case. I can hear it in your voice. He took it for free, I said. Lon groaned. That's worse. Who died? Lillian Hargrove, I said. There was a pause, then a low whistle. That's a name. And a staircase, I said. Listen, which bank holds her accounts? You've printed her picture enough. Somebody must have sent you a holiday card. Lon snorted. You're asking me to do research like I'm a reporter. Try to stay calm, I said. Lon gave me what he had. Hudson Fidelity, Private Client Division. He also gave me a tidbit that was more valuable than a bank name. 2 days earlier, a gossip item had floated through a donor luncheon about Lillian trying to stop something at her bank, making calls furious. The story had been laughed off because wealthy people are always furious at someone, and the world only cares when they're dead. I hung up and reported to Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Hudson Fidelity. Private client, I said. And she tried to stop something 2 days ago. Wolfe nodded. A transfer. You're already sure? I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. The word, freeze, on the notepad. The urgency, the accelerated death. Someone moved money, or attempted to. Mrs. Hargrove attempted to reverse it. That is motive. I sat down. We still can't open her laptop. Wolfe's gaze moved to the phone. Then we will employ someone who can. Not the police? I asked. Wolfe's nostrils flared. They will seize it and it will disappear into procedural sludge. No, Archie, call Mr. Ori Cather. I blinked. Cather, the safecracker. Wolfe's eyes were flat. He is not merely a safecracker. He is competent with small machines and stubborn barriers. He also owes me. I made the call. Cather arrived within an hour, hat in hand, eyes darting as if expecting cops to drop from the ceiling. Wolfe greeted him with the minimum civility required to keep society from collapsing. Ori, Wolfe said, you will open Mrs. Hargrove's laptop. Cather peered at it as if it might explode. I don't do. You do what you are told, Wolfe said. Cather sighed, sat at my desk, and produced tools that looked like they belonged in a watchmaker's kit. There, he said grudgingly. Password was a phrase. People like phrases. What phrase? I asked. Cather shrugged. Something about a garden. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted slightly. Orchids, he murmured, and that was the closest he came to a smile. The laptop opened to an email draft unsent, addressed to Harold Vance. Subject line, codicil, urgent. It was dated this morning at 10:12. Wolfe read over my shoulder. He didn't move closer. He never crowds. He simply absorbed. The draft was short, sharp and scared. Lillian wrote that she had discovered a transfer from a trust account, Hargrove Family Charitable Trust, to a contractor entity she didn't recognize, Sloan and Kerr Services. She wrote that she believed her stepson Martin had authorized it using an old power of attorney instrument that should have been revoked. She wrote she had called Hudson Fidelity to freeze the transfer, but they are stalling. She wrote, if anything happens to me before I sign, deliver the packet in my desk to Mr. Wolfe. I sat back slowly. Sloan and Kerr Services, that's our lawyer's name with a partner attached. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A shell. And the transfer was 2 days ago, I said. She tried to freeze it. She couldn't. Then she planned to revise the will. Then she dies. Wolfe's voice was calm. Yes, which means, I said, she wasn't just changing who gets the china. She was trying to stop a theft. Wolfe nodded. A theft with legal camouflage. I opened the document folder on the laptop. Most of it had been wiped recently. Empty directories where files should be, like a room after a hurried robbery. But the printer queue history showed something had printed late this afternoon. 1 page, then cancelled. The file name was half visible, Codicil Fay Draft Fay Final. Someone had printed it, I said, then tried to erase it, and they burned a scrap badly. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. The scorched scrap you found at the townhouse. Yep, I said. We have proof she wrote it, proof she printed it, and proof someone removed it. Wolfe leaned back, massive and unhurried. And we have evidence of the second crime, the fast ruling. Someone required the city to accept an accident before anyone examined motive. I exhaled. Wolfe, that means Hudson Fidelity is involved, or paid, or pressured. Wolfe's eyes went cold. Exactly. The phone rang again. Fritz answered and brought it in. Expression steady. Kramer's voice was gravelly. Got your warrant. Hudson Fidelity confirms Mrs. Hargrove called 2 days ago, trying to freeze a transfer. Amount 480,000. My eyebrows went up. That's not pocket change. That's motive with a suit on. Kramer continued. Transfer already cleared. Initiated by Martin Hargrove, using an old authorization form the bank says was on file. They say Mrs. Hargrove was confused. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Naturally they say that, Kramer barked. And the recipient account? Sloan and Care Services. That ring any bells now? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It rings like a church bell, Inspector. Kramer paused. Sloan's screaming in my office. Says it's all legal. Says the trust's got contractors. Says you're poisoning the case. Wolfe's tone was icy. Tell him to drink an antidote. Kramer grunted. You want Martin Hargrove? Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Yes, he said into the phone. Bring him here tomorrow at 11. If he refuses, arrest him for obstruction. You will enjoy that. Kramer gave a short, unpleasant laugh. Yeah, I will. Wolfe hung up. Then looked at me as if the next move were obvious. Archie, he said. Mrs. Hargrove tried to stop a transfer. She planned to revise her will. Someone erased her draft from paper and machine. Someone tried to declare her death an accident before any of that could surface. Now we will meet the beneficiary who had the strongest reason to accelerate time. I tapped my notebook where the scorched scrap sat. And we'll see whether Martin Hargrove's hands match the bruise. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Or whether Mr. Sloane's do. I sat back, letting it settle. A missing draft. A missing packet. A bank transfer that shouldn't exist. A lawyer too eager to burn paper. And a caller who knew my name and told me to keep a desk closed. As if the desk were the only thing keeping the story from collapsing. Outside, the wind pressed against the brownstone windows. Inside, Wolfe sat very still in his chair, and I knew the case had stopped being about a staircase. It was about control, of money, of documents, of timing, and of the story everyone would believe. And Wolfe had just decided to take the story away. Chapter 6. If you want to know what a man is hiding, don't ask him. Watch where he goes when he thinks he's unobserved. That's a principle I learned long before Nero. Wolfe taught me to pronounce deduce, like a weapon, and it applies especially to handymen with guilty faces and lawyers with clean shoes. Wolfe sent me out the next morning with 3 instructions, each delivered in the tone he uses when he thinks the universe is being slow on purpose. 1. Do not be seen. 2. Do not be killed. 3. Observe roll. That order, I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Your priorities are often sentimental. Sentiment keeps me alive, I told him, and went. I caught Raoul at the Hargrove townhouse a little after 9. He came out the service entrance with his tool bag, looked up and down the street as if expecting a chorus, and then headed toward the subway with the stiff gait of a man carrying something that isn't in his bag. I followed at the comfortable distance a New Yorker uses when he isn't following. Close enough to see, far enough to look uninterested. Raoul rode downtown, got off near Columbus Circle, and walked 3 blocks to a public parking garage that smelled of gasoline and stale coffee and the city's impatience. Garages are good places for quiet conversations. The noise covers words, and nobody looks at anyone long enough to remember them. Raoul went to the 3rd level and stopped near a support pillar marked C-7. He set his bag down, wiped his hands on his pants, and waited. That told me he wasn't there to fix anything. A minute later, a dark sedan slid into the aisle with the slow confidence of a man who has paid for privacy. It stopped 2 spaces away. The driver's door opened. Brett Sloan stepped out. He was dressed like yesterday's obituary, clean coat, clean scarf, clean face. Even in a garage he looked like he belonged in a courtroom. Raoul's shoulders hunched as if the air had gotten heavier. Sloan didn't waste time on greetings. He spoke, low, close, his head angled so a casual watcher would see only 2 men discussing tires. I couldn't hear the words over the garage noise, but I didn't need to. Raoul's hands opened and closed. Nervous, Sloan's hand went into his coat pocket. Money is loud even when it's quiet. Sloan took out an envelope, thick tan, and held it in his fingers for a moment like bait. Raoul's eyes fixed on it. Sloan said something, and Raoul shook his head once, sharply. Sloan's posture changed. He leaned in, and Raoul flinched. That flinch was my favorite part. It meant Raoul wasn't being paid for artistry. He was being paid for obedience. Sloan pushed the envelope into Raoul's hand. Raoul's fingers closed around it like a drowning man grabbing a rope. Then Sloan produced a second item. Small, white folded paper. He held it out. Raoul hesitated, then took it too. That second item mattered more than the money. I moved closer, shifting behind a parked Buick, using the same casual patience the city uses when it's waiting for a light. I didn't want to be seen, but I did want to hear something, and garages have echoes. Sloane's voice carried for one sentence. "You keep your mouth shut. You already talked too much yesterday." Raoul's voice came thin. "I didn't. I had to." Sloane cut him off. "You do as you're told. You bought what I told you. You applied what I told you. You forget what you told you." Raoul swallowed. "What if they test it?" Sloane's laugh was small and ugly. "Let them. It's Polish. It's oil. It's not a confession. It's murder," Raoul whispered. Sloane leaned closer. His voice dropped. "It's an accident." Raoul's head jerked up, and for a second he looked like he might throw the envelope back and run. Then Sloane said something else, too low for me to catch, and Raoul's shoulders sagged. That was fear doing its job. Sloane turned away, got back into the sedan, and drove off without a look back. Raoul stood there, breathing hard, staring at the envelope like it might explode. Then he shoved it into his tool bag and hurried toward the stairs. I let him go. There was no sense getting dramatic in a garage. Garages are where drama goes to die. I followed him out at a distance and watched him ride the subway back uptown, clutching his bag tight, eyes fixed on nothing. He got off 3 blocks from the Hargrove townhouse and disappeared into a deli. I didn't follow him inside. I had what I needed. Confirmation that Sloane was still managing his loose ends and that Raoul was one of them. I went back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, of course, looking like a man who had never moved in his life and never needed to. Sol Panzer was there too, sitting in the red chair with his hat on his knee, looking as if he had simply decided not to be elsewhere. "Well?" Wolfe demanded the moment I entered. I threw my coat on the chair and said, "Your handyman got paid." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "By Mr. Sloane." "In a parking garage," I said. Like a scene from a cheap picture, envelope of cash and a second folded paper, probably instructions. Sloane told him he talked too much yesterday. Sol's eyes sharpened. "You're sure it was Sloane?" "I'd bet Wolfe's orchids," I said. Clean suit, clean voice, dirty envelope. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Describe their manner. "Raoul was scared," I said. "Not greedy, scared. Scared. Sloane wasn't nervous at all. He was annoyed. Like a man paying a late bill, he actually said, "It's an accident." Raoul whispered, "It's murder." Wolfe's eyes became very still. "Excellent." "Excellent," I echoed. "You have a strange idea of excellence." "It is excellent," Wolfe said. "That your observation confirms my conclusion." He leaned back, fingers steepled. The staircase was prepared by contract. A clean suit brokered a dirty act, and a frightened handyman is being managed after the fact. Sol said, "That means Sloane has authority." Wolfe's gaze flicked to him, "Or he has an employer." I sat down. "Wolfe, the way Sloane handled him, he wasn't bargaining. He was directing." "Yes," Wolfe said. "He is the broker. Brokers do not kill, they arrange." "Then who killed?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "We will discover that, but first we must understand why." I tapped my notebook. "We have the transfer, 480 grand to Sloane and Kerr Services. We have Lillian trying to freeze it. We have her will draft missing. We have grip bruises. Now we have Sloane paying the handyman." Wolfe nodded. "You have it. Now connected." I frowned. "To me it looks like theft first, murder second." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Precisely. The murder protected a theft already in motion." He said it like a verdict, and it hit me with the chill of how clean it was. The money had moved. The paperwork had been positioned. The story was already written. Then Lillian tried to edit it, and someone erased her. Sol's voice was quiet. If the theft was already moving, the killer had a deadline. Wolfe nodded. The will revision, the bank call, the sealed packet. These were threats to the theft's completion. Therefore, the murder is not merely a crime, it is a safeguard. I exhaled. and the fast ruling. Wolfe's mouth tightened. The second crime. To lock the story before it could be challenged. If the death is an accident, there is no investigation. If there is no investigation, the theft remains legal. Saul's eyes narrowed. Who benefits besides Martin Hargrove? Wolfe's gaze lifted. Anyone tied to the trust. Anyone tied to Sloane and Kerr. Anyone who required Mrs. Hargrove's silence. I said, "You're building quite a guest list." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "We will require it." The phone rang. Fritz brought it in. "Inspector Kramer," Fritz said. Wolfe took the receiver. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer's voice was sharp. "Got Martin Hargrove for you. He's coming at 11, like you ordered. Not happy." Wolfe's tone was calm. "His happiness is irrelevant," Kramer continued. "And Sloane's partner, Kerr, doesn't exist. Company's a shell, registered to a mailbox." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "As expected," Kramer barked. "What the hell are you doing, Wolfe?" Wolfe replied evenly. "Solving your case." He hung up. I looked at Wolfe. If Sloane is the broker, he's brokering for Martin or for someone above Martin. Wolfe's gaze went distant for a moment, then snapped back. Martin will attempt to appear offended. Mr. Sloane will attempt to appear outraged. Both are performances. We will observe which actor forgets his lines. Saul rose. "You want me here for Martin?" Wolfe nodded once. "Yes. Your presence is corrective." Saul's mouth moved the way it does when he almost smiles, and then remembers he's Saul, understood. I sat back and watched Wolfe's face settle into that calm, methodical readiness. He had the theft in one hand, the murder in the other, and he was starting to squeeze them together until the same fingerprints appeared on both. Outside, the city kept rushing, buying, selling, and pretending accidents happen all by themselves. Inside, Wolfe had decided the accident was a contract, and now we were going to meet the men who signed it. Chapter 7, when people are grieving, they move slowly. When people are stealing, they move fast. That isn't a moral statement, it's a calendar. The morning after my garage tour, the Hargrove family began behaving as if the only proper tribute to a dead woman was a stack of signed documents. By 10:30, the phones in Wolfe's office had already rung twice, first from Inspector Kramer to announce Martin Hargrove's arrival, and then from a voice that introduced itself as estate management, with the tone of a man who believed the city existed to accommodate his filing deadlines. Wolfe listened to the second call for exactly 11 seconds before he handed me the receiver. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "dispose of it." I took the phone. Archie Goodwin. A man's voice, brisk and clipped, said, "This is Spencer Fife, estate manager for the Hargrove properties. We need Mr. Wolfe's cooperation." "You need a slow leak in your schedule," I told him. "What do you mean by cooperation?" "Mrs. Hargrove's estate must enter probate immediately," Fife said. "There are time, sensitive holdings, trustees, charitable commitments, and a large transfer that shouldn't exist." I said, "Yes, I've heard." There was a pause. Then, carefully, "Mr. Goodwin, it would be best if you did not speculate. It would be best if you did not hurry," I said. "Probate doesn't improve wine." Fife's briskness tightened. "The family requires closure." "Closure is what you get on a coffin," I said. "Come to the brownstone at noon with the trust files and the estate ledger. We'll discuss closure." He hesitated, which meant he didn't want to bring files into Wolfe's office. Then he said, "I will see what I can do." "You do that," I replied. "Memory is a wonderful muscle. Exercise it." I hung up and looked at Wolfe. "Estate manager named Spencer Fife. He wants probate yesterday." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Speed as comfort." "Or speed as concealment," I said. Wolfe made a small sound of agreement, and then, because Wolfe is Wolfe, he turned his attention to the main event. At 11. Inspector Kramer arrived with Martin Hargrove. Martin came in like an insult. He was in his early 30s, tall, well-fed, and dressed in mourning that looked purchased rather than worn. His hair was perfect. His face was the kind of handsome that has learned to sulk when it doesn't get its way. He looked at Wolfe as if Wolfe were an inconvenience in a chair. "Mr. Wolfe," Martin said, "I don't know why I'm here." Wolfe regarded him with mild distaste. "Because, Mr. Hargrove, you have been helpful." Martin's brows shot up. "Helpful?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "You transferred $480,000 from a family trust 2 days ago." Martin's face flushed. That's family business." "It is now homicide business," Kramer growled, enjoying the words. Martin snapped. "It was authorized. The trust employs contractors." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Indeed, one contractor entity named Sloan and Care Services, which appears to be a mailbox." Martin's jaw tightened. "Brett Sloan handled the paperwork. He's counsel." "Counsel," Wolfe repeated. "A word that often means convenient cover." Martin's eyes flashed. "You're accusing Brett Sloan of fraud." Wolfe did not answer the question. Wolfe rarely answers questions that are asked for effect. Instead, he said, "Mrs. Hargrove attempted to freeze your transfer." Martin's face went still. She was confused. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "She was precise enough to schedule a will revision this morning. She was precise enough to draft a codicil cutting your distribution. That does not suggest confusion, Mr. Hargrove. It suggests regret." Martin's nostrils flared. "She hated me." "Why?" Wolfe asked blandly. Martin hesitated. Because she thought I was irresponsible." Wolfe nodded, as if noting an animal's habits. "And were you?" Martin's face reddened. "This is absurd. I loved her." Kramer snorted. "You loved her money." Martin rounded on him. "This is harassment." Wolfe's voice cut through, quiet and heavy. "No, Mr. Hargrove, this is inquiry. And I have a specific question. Where were you yesterday afternoon between 3 and 4? Martin blinked. "At my office." "Which office?" Wolfe asked. Martin's eyes flicked. "Hargrove Holdings, Midtown." "Who can verify?" Wolfe asked. Martin tightened his jaw. "My assistant, my staff." Wolfe nodded once. "Names?" Martin listed them, irritated. Wolfe listened, filed them away, and then said, "And why did you maintain an old authorization form on file at Hudson Fidelity?" Martin's eyes narrowed. "Because my father set it up." "Your father is dead," Wolfe said. "Mrs. Hargrove was alive. She could have revoked it. She didn't." Martin snapped. Wolfe's gaze stayed cold, until she attempted to. Martin leaned forward, voice sharp. "Look, she was emotional. She was embarrassed. There were rumors." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "About what?" Martin hesitated. That hesitation had weight. Kramer barked. "Answer him." Martin's mouth tightened. "About the trust. About how she managed it. People said she skimmed, that she used it to fund her lifestyle." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And did she?" Martin's expression hardened. "I don't know. But Sloan said there were risks, and the transfer was to protect the trust. A repositioning." "A theft," I muttered. Martin glared at me. "You don't know anything." "I know a mailbox when I see one," I said. Wolfe held up a hand, and I shut up. Wolfe said, "Mr. Hargrove, your stepmother intended to destroy something. Mr. Sloan blurted that fact yesterday. Do you know what she intended to destroy?" Martin's face went pale at the edges. Number Wolfe's eyes stayed on him. "Then you will learn. Because if you do not, you will be suspected of ensuring she could not." Kramer stepped closer. "You want to be charged, Hargrove. Keep playing dumb." Martin stiffened. "This is insane." Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. "Perhaps, but it is effective. You may go, Mr. Hargrove." "For the moment." Martin's head snapped up. "That's it. For now," Wolfe said. "Do not leave the city. Do not sign anything without reading it. That may be difficult for you." Martin stood abruptly, cheeks flushed. He shot Wolfe a look of pure dislike and left with Kramer's men hovering at his elbows, like reminders. When the door closed, I exhaled. "He's slippery." Wolfe's voice was dry. "He is young, Youth is often slick. Saul Panzer, who had been sitting in the red chair like a quiet consequence, said, "He's not the hand." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. "Number, he is the motive. The hand may be Mr. Sloane or another." The doorbell rang again. Fritz came in. "Mr. Wolfe, a gentleman is here, Mr. Spencer Fife." "Send him in," Wolfe said, and his tone suggested he would enjoy this less than a dental procedure. Spencer Fife entered with a briefcase, held like a shield, and a smile held like a receipt. He was in his 50s, thin, with the anxious competence of a man who lives among files and fears fire. "Mr. Wolfe," he said briskly, "thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Wolfe regarded him. "Short notice appears to be your religion." Fife's smile tightened. "The family is concerned." "The family is hurrying," Wolfe corrected. Why Fife spread his hands. "Grief and necessity. There are properties, payrolls, trustees. We must file for probate immediately to maintain continuity." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Continuity of what?" "Theft." Fife flinched. "Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe cut him off. "Bring me the trust records and the estate ledger." Fife set his briefcase on the chair, opened it, and produced a thin stack of papers. Too thin. Wolfe looked at it with contempt. "That is not sufficient." Fife's smile became brittle. "Those are the primary." "I am not interested in your adjectives," Wolfe said. "Where are the financial files for the trust transfer?" Fife blinked. I don't have them." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You cannot find them." Fife cleared his throat. "They are in Mrs. Hargrove's personal file cabinet." "It was locked," was Wolfe asked. Fife hesitated. "The key is missing." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Convenient." Fife bristled. "It's not convenient. It's unfortunate." Wolfe's voice was mild. "Unfortunate for whom?" Fife's mouth tightened. "For everyone." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Fife, you are either incompetent or obstructive. I suspect you prefer to be incompetent." Fife flushed, "I assure you." Wolfe raised a hand. "Archie." I stood. "Mr. Fife, let's make this easy. You will return to the Hargrove townhouse, locate the missing financial files, and bring them here by 3 o'clock. If you fail, Wolfe will tell Inspector Kramer that you are interfering with a homicide investigation." Fife swallowed. "That's extreme." "Extreme is dying on a staircase," I said. "This is paperwork." Fife's eyes darted. He knew Kramer, or at least feared him, and fear is a better motivator than grief. I'll see what I can do," he said again. Wolfe's eyes went cold. "You will not see, you will do." Fife gathered his too-thin stack and hurried out with the posture of a man whose memory had just been stimulated by a boot. When the door closed, I said, "He's hiding the files." Wolfe's voice was calm. "Or he is being instructed to misplace them until probate is complete." "Probate in a hurry," I muttered. "So they can bury questions under paperwork." Wolfe nodded once. "Precisely. If the estate is processed quickly, the transfer becomes normalized. Then objections require litigation. Litigation requires time. Time favors the thief," Saul said quietly. "So they're racing." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes, and I do not lose races in my own city." I leaned back. "You're going to stop probate." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I will stop what it conceals." The phone rang. Wolfe didn't reach for it at once. He waited one beat, as if daring it to be important. Fritz brought it in. "Mr. Wolfe, Hudson Fidelity. We have been advised you are in possession of certain allegations regarding the Hargrove Trust. I must insist you refrain from contacting our clients." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You must insist." "Yes," Pell said. "Any interference with probate—" Wolfe cut her off. "Madam, if you speak the word probate again, I will have Archie mail you a dictionary. You have already interfered by accepting an authorization you knew should have been reviewed. I will contact whomever I please." There was a tight pause. "Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe's voice was icy. "If Hudson Fidelity wishes to protect itself, It will provide me today the internal approval chain for the transfer, including names, if it does not. You will discover that your compliance department is not compliant enough." He hung up. I stared. That was polite. Wolfe's eyes were cold. It was accurate. He looked at Saul. Mr. Panzer remained near the door. "I anticipate visitors." Saul nodded once. I looked at Wolfe. "You think someone will try to push probate through before we can stop them?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I think someone will try to bury a theft beneath legal forms before murder can be proven. They are coordinating bank lawyer, estate manager, perhaps beneficiary. It is a rush." "And you hate being rushed," I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I hate being managed." Outside, the winter light faded early, and inside the brownstone the air felt like it was tightening around a knot somewhere. Someone was pushing paper as hard as they had pushed a woman, and Wolfe was beginning to push back. At 3 o'clock, Spencer Fife would either find his missing files or discover that pressure does not improve memory unless it becomes fear. Chapter 8. At 2:40, 5 Fritz came into the office with the careful tread he uses when a tray might spill or a fact might. Behind him was Tessa Lane, the maid, bundled in a coat that looked borrowed and terrified, her hands clenched around her handbag as if it were the only solid thing left in her life. Wolfe looked up. "Miss Lane, you were instructed to remain available." I had to come," she said, voice thin. I remembered what she said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. What she said. "Miss Lane is always more valuable than what you fear." Tessa swallowed hard and opened her bag. From inside she produced a small flash drive wrapped in a handkerchief. "This is the packet," she whispered. Mrs. Hargrove called it that. She held it out as if it were a holy relic. "She gave it to me," Tessa whispered. "Yesterday, before Mr. Sloane arrived, she said, if anything happened, I was to keep it safe, not in the house, not where anyone could find it." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Excellent." I took it gently and held it up. "This is what Sloane wanted burned," I said. Tessa shook her head fast. "No, he didn't know about this. He wanted the letter burned, but she said he would try to erase her." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "He did." I plugged the drive into my desk computer. A single folder opened. "Lech, if I am gone." Inside was one audio file with a timestamp from 2 days earlier. I clicked play. Lillian Hargrove's voice filled the office. Clear, angry, controlled, not the voice of a confused woman. "Brett, I called the bank," she said. "You moved money out of the trust. You used Martin's old authorization. That is theft." Sloane's voice followed, smooth but edged. "Lillian, please, don't be dramatic. It's a temporary repositioning." "It's criminal," she snapped. "I'm freezing it, and if Hudson stalls, I'm calling the police." There was a pause, paper rustling, a breath, the faint hum of a line. Then another male voice came on, deeper, calm, unfamiliar. "Mrs. Hargrove," the voice said, "this doesn't have to become ugly." Lillian's voice turned cold. "Who is this?" "A man who keeps things orderly," the voice replied. "You will stop making calls." "I will do no such thing," Lillian said. "If you think money buys silence," the male voice cut in, still calm, "it buys speed." A faint sound, Sloane exhaling, then the male voice again, quieter, decisive, "Make it look clean." The recording ended with a click. For a moment, no one in the office breathed. Even Fritz stood very still, as if motion might disturb the meaning. I looked at Wolfe. "That's your instruction," I said softly. Wolfe's face had gone utterly cold. "Yes." Tessa Lane's eyes were wet. "She was scared," she whispered. "She said someone else was on the line." She said he sounded like a judge. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the silent computer screen. "A judge," he murmured, "or a manager." I turned the flash drive over in my fingers. "This turns the fall into a planned act," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "It turns it into a contract." He lifted his eyes. "Archie, we will require Mr. Sloane, and we will require the voice. Saul Panzer, by the door, said quietly, "The voice is the employer." Wolfe's gaze narrowed, indeed, and now, his voice was calm, deadly. "We have the words that ruin their hurry." Chapter 9, when Wolfe says, "the second crime," he doesn't mean an afterthought. He means a structure built on top of a body, paper laid over bone, signatures laid over bruises, and official ink used the way some men use a gag. The flash drive, the desk packet, sat on Wolfe's desk like a small black accusation. Wolfe didn't touch it again. The missing desk packet had simply changed form. He didn't need to. The words were already in the room. "Make it look clean." "Archie," he said, "a homicide can be committed by a shove. It can also be committed by a ruling." I nodded, and somebody bought the ruling. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Find me the purchase." That sounded poetic until you remember that Wolfe has a talent for making poetry behave like arithmetic. Inspector Kramer arrived at 4 with his coat unbuttoned and his patience already spent. He took one look at the flash drive and the grim set of Wolfe's face and didn't bother with the usual barking. "You were right," Kramer said. "About the hurry." Wolfe's tone was flat. "Naturally, explain." "Explain." Kramer dropped into a chair like it offended him. "Deputy Coroner Alden," he said. He was ready to stamp it an accident before Raskin even finished his first look. Raskin protested. Alden overruled him. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "On whose insistence?" Kramer's mouth tightened. Sloan called Alden twice. "Alden says it was concern for the family." "Concern," Wolfe repeated, and the word sounded like dirt. "And Alden yields to concern." Kramer snorted. "Alden yields to money. We pulled his recent donation list, found it in a hurry once we started looking. A charity dinner, a research fund contribution, 2 checks routed through a family foundation." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted slightly. "The Hargrove Circle." "Yeah," Kramer said. "Hargrove Family Charitable Trust gives to Alden's pet cause, and Alden returns the favor by calling a death simple." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Who signed those checks?" Kramer hesitated, then said it. "Spencer Fife's name is on the authorization paperwork, estate manager, and Martin's approval stamp is on the foundation ledger." I whistled softly. So probate wasn't just paperwork, it was leverage. Kramer jabbed a finger toward Wolfe. And Sloan didn't just want an accident ruling. He pushed for it before the lab could test the wax, before Raskin could document the bruise pattern, before anything could slow the story down. Wolfe nodded once, as if Kramer were finally reading from the correct page. Because once the death is officially simple, any challenge becomes inconvenient litigation. Kramer grunted. "You got it, and the bank is squirming. Hudson Fidelity's compliance officer called me, said they're being misunderstood." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "They are being exposed." He rose, slowly, heavily, behind his desk. When Wolfe stands in that deliberate way, it means he has stopped collecting pieces and started arranging them. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you will bring Deputy Coroner Alden here at 7. You will also bring Mr. Sloan." Kramer blinked. "To your house?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "And Mr. Martin Hargrove, and Mr. Spencer Fife, and Miss Marjorie Pell of Hudson Fidelity, all of them." Kramer's face hardened. "That's a circus." Wolfe's eyes were cold. "Number it is an accounting," I said, and the voice on the recording. Wolfe's gaze flicked to the flash drive. The person who required the death to be officially simple is the person who spoke those words. The others are merely tools, some willing, some frightened. Kramer stood, already annoyed at having to do Wolfe's errands, which is his natural state. 7 o'clock, he grumbled. "If this blows up." "It will," Wolfe said, mild as a knife. "That is the intention." When Kramer left, the house felt quiet, in the way a theater feels quiet, just before the curtain moves. Wolfe sat again, eyes half-lidded, and spoke without looking at me. "Archie," he said, "tonight we will watch who fights hardest to keep the story clean." I glanced at the flash drive. Small and deadly on the desk, And we'll hear if the judge's voice belongs to someone we already know. Wolfe's eyes opened, very slightly, precisely. The doorbell rang, sharp, insistent, and Saul Panzer's hand moved inside his coat with the calm of a man who dislikes surprises even more than Wolfe does. Chapter 10. The doorbell's insistence had Saul Panzer's hand inside his coat before Fritz reached the knob, and when Saul does that, he isn't practicing. Wolfe didn't look up from his chair. He already knew what the bell meant. The cast was arriving for the last act. By 7:10 the office was crowded, the way Wolfe hates. Bodies in his air, shoes on his rug, voices trying to become important. Inspector Kramer stood near the door with the patience of a man guarding a kennel. Brett Sloane sat rigid in the yellow chair, chin high, eyes bright, with controlled outrage. Martin Hargrove occupied the red chair like a tenant who refuses to pay rent. Spencer Fife hovered on the edge of the sofa, briefcase clutched, sweat shining where competence had sprung a leak. Marjorie Pell from Hudson Fidelity sat straight, backed cool as a file cabinet. Deputy Coroner Alden looked offended to be alive. Tessa Lane stood near Fritz, pale but stubborn. Raoul the handyman wasn't there yet, which Wolfe had allowed on purpose. Wolfe let the silence thicken until it made the room uncomfortable enough to be useful. Then he said mildly, "I have just dictated a letter to the district attorney. It will be delivered tonight. Attached is a recording of Mrs. Lillian Hargrove confronting Mr. Sloane about an illicit transfer, and a male voice instructing him, make it look clean." Sloane's face twitched. Pell's eyes narrowed. "Fife swallowed so hard I heard it," Kramer said. "You did what?" Wolfe turned his head slightly. "I am forcing haste, Inspector. It has been the enemy's advantage. I am repossessing it." Martin snapped. "This is insane. You can't." Wolfe lifted a finger, and Martin stopped, because something about Wolfe's certainty makes childish men remember they were once corrected. Wolfe went on. "The question is not whether Mrs. Hargrove was murdered. The question is who required the death to be officially simple, and why." He looked at Marjorie Pell. "Miss Pell, Hudson Fidelity accepted an outdated authorization, processed a transfer to a shell entity, and then characterized the account holder as confused when she protested. That is negligence at best and collusion at worst." Pell's lips tightened. "Our procedures are irrelevant," Wolfe said. "You will provide the internal approval chain to Inspector Kramer, including names tonight." Pell's eyes flicked to Kramer. Then back. She didn't argue. When a bank stops arguing, it starts calculating exits. Wolfe's gaze moved to Deputy Coroner Alden. "And you, sir, you declared an accident at record speed." Alden bristled. "I followed standard." "Paid standards," Wolfe corrected. "Donations routed through the Hargrove charitable apparatus found their way into your preferred cause. In exchange, you attempted to bury a homicide beneath a signature." Alden's cheeks reddened. "I resent." "You will soon resent handcuffs," Wolfe said, and let his eyes slide to Spencer Fife. "Mr. Fife authorized those donations." Fife's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sloane found his voice first sharp and polished. "This is slander. Wolfe is manufacturing drama too." "To punish your insolence?" Wolfe asked, and his tone went cold. "Yes, among other things." He leaned forward slightly. "You came to my house to employ me as a tool. When I refused, you and your associates attempted to teach me humility by arranging a death that would not be investigated. That was your challenge. I accept challenges." Kramer growled. "Get to the point." Wolfe nodded. "Certainly, Archie. Bring in Mr. Rawl." I opened the office door. Saul stepped aside, and Raoul came in as if he had been escorted by gravity itself. His face was grey, his hands shook. He looked at Sloane and flinched. Wolfe spoke gently, which is always alarming. "Mr. Raoul, tell us what you were paid to do." Raoul swallowed. "I waxed the stairs." Wolfe waited. Raoul's eyes darted to Kramer, to Saul, to Sloane, then to the floor. "He paid me," Raoul whispered. "Cash," he said. "Make it shine." He gave me the industrial polish. He gave me oil for the rail. He told me to loosen the runner, just enough so it would catch a foot. Sloane snapped. Liar, Raoul recoiled, then suddenly straightened, and the fear turned into something else. Anger at being used, maybe, or simply the relief of finally dropping a weight. He told me, Raoul said louder, Simone would do the rest. Someone would be there to steady her, then push. Not hard, just steady. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And who told you that? Raoul pointed, trembling. Not at Sloane, at Spencer Fife. The room made a sound all at once. Pell inhaling, Martin whispering an oath, Tessa gasping. Fife went white. That's a lie. Fife croaked. Wolfe's voice was quiet. No, Mr. Fife. It is your voice on the recording. Fife's eyes flicked wildly. I don't. Wolfe cut him off. You speak as Mrs. Lane described, like a judge, like a manager. You even telephoned from the Hargrove house and told my assistant, leave the desk closed, because the drawer had already been emptied. You told Mr. Sloane, make it look clean, because you required the death to be officially simple, not for grief, not for comfort. So probate could proceed before questions, and the transfer could become routine. Martin lurched to his feet. You used my authorization. Wolfe nodded. You were convenient. Mr. Hargrove, you provided the stamp. Mr. Sloane provided the paperwork. Mr. Fife provided the plan and the donations that bought the conclusion. Kramer's face was hard now, satisfied in the ugliest way. He stepped forward. Fife, Sloane, you're under arrest. Sloane sprang up. This is outrageous. You can't. Saul moved one step and Sloane stopped, because Saul's calm is persuasive. Kramer snapped cuffs on Sloane, then on Fife. Alden sputtered protests until one of Kramer's men took his arm and started him toward the door. Pell sat very still, already seeing a compliance hearing in her future. Martin stood shaking, not from sorrow, but from the shock of finding out he had been the wallet, not the boss. When they were gone, the office felt like a room after a storm, messy, quiet, and relieved to still be standing. Tessa Lane whispered. So she didn't fall. Wolfe's gaze softened a fraction. No, Miss Lane. She was pushed into an ending that suited thieves. And the money? I asked. It will be recovered, Wolfe said. Thieves are swift until they must account. I leaned back. You took the case for free. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I solved it for free. I did not endure insolence for free. He nodded to Fritz, who appeared with an envelope, as if he had been holding it behind his back the entire time. Wolfe slid it across the desk to me. Mr. Sloane's check, Wolfe said. He brought it with him, believing he could purchase my silence after the fact. I instructed him, through Mr. Panzer, to bring payment for the consultation he attempted yesterday. I opened the envelope. A check, very real, very large, made out to Nero Wolfe. Wolfe added, You will deposit it tomorrow. Then you will send the identical amount to the charitable program Mrs. Hargrove supported. Without ceremony, the thief will finance the virtue he attempted to exploit. I grinned. That's almost festive. It is tidy, Wolfe said, and rose. Now, Archie, I have neglected my orchids. Murder is disruptive. Later, with the brownstone quiet again, Wolfe upstairs with his plants and Fritz restoring civilization with coffee. Saul paused at the door. He looked at me once. They wanted it clean, he said. New York hates stains, I replied. Saul's mouth moved the way it does when he almost smiles and decides not to. Then he left, and the house settled back into its proper shape. Wolfe's certainty, my chair, and a city outside that would keep calling disasters accidents until someone like Wolfe refused to let it.